Hello, this is Ada Sashry working with Group 1, and our subject is the preservation of historic properties. I'm going to be doing part 1, the reasons for preservation. Have you ever been walking along and you found the most amazing historic building? This happened to me and my husband one day when we were walking along through downtown Houston looking for something to do, and we ran across the most beautiful library. It was called the Julia Idason Building, part of the Houston Public Library System. Julia Idason Building was built in 1926, part of the made in the Spanish Renaissance style. That's according to the Texas Heritage Trails Program website. Now it's one of our favorite outings. We love going to this place and just exploring. Historic preservation has always been an interest of mine. I worked a couple years ago with the National Civic Arts Society. I actually did their website, which is an organization that is interested in preserving historic buildings in Washington, D.C. Historic preservation is really important to a lot of people. We're going to be talking about what types of historic preservation are possible, and also 4 reasons why you should be interested in historic preservation. So what types are possible? What types of things can be preserved? Well, the first type, from the Community Toolbox website, Chapter 26, Section 7, is a landscape, such as a Civil War battlefield or a city park. My favorite city park was always Golden Gate Park in San Francisco. The second type of preservation that can be done is a full neighborhood, an entire section of a city. Historic neighborhoods are always really fun to go visit. If you've ever been to an old downtown or an old section or an old, the main street of a town that's been completely preserved, you know what I'm talking about. There's architecture, building techniques, and materials there that are no longer available anywhere else. The third type of preservation is a building feature, not a building, but something like a sign, a landmark, an old stone wall, a fence, murals, trees. A lot of trees were used as survey markers for historical properties, and also historic events often happened at a tree or under a tree because it was a landscape marker. The fourth type is, of course, what we're most familiar with, which is a building or a structure, such as a bridge, a shop, a factory, a house, barns, any of that. Now, there's 4 reasons why you should be interested in preserving old historic properties. The first reason I call the city factor. Historic buildings, well, they're the key to the city's past. They are living history. And it's way more fun, for instance, if you're a kid, to visit a building rather than just read about it in some old textbook. So preserving the buildings of a city is very important for the history of that city. Also, historic preservation is eminently capable of reclaiming old rundown sections of a city. A lot of towns have reclaimed entire portions of their streets because of restoration projects. The second reason for restoring, I call the money factor. According to Julia Roche of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, usually really only big chain stores can afford to build a brand new building for a new shop that's opening up. Small businesses thrive when they get in little old buildings. My favorite hair salon, for example, is in this little 1920s house. I love this place just because of the house. I want to visit the house. And so they get more business because of that. They also don't have to put out as much of a initial burden, it doesn't cost them as much to start up in an old building. Also, old buildings raise the real estate value in the surrounding area. Historic properties appreciate faster, and they maintain a higher overall economic value than comparable buildings of the same size, according to Roche, December 2015. Nearby buildings will also copy the aesthetics of old buildings, and they will end up with a higher commercial value because they'll simply look better. The third reason for historic preservation is the environmental factor. I mean, let's face it, preserving an old building or an old section of town is the ultimate in recycling. You're not, and none of that stuff is going to the landfill, and you're not bringing in any new stuff to build anything. You're using all of the resources that are already available. Plus, old buildings tend to be designed from the beginning to be more energy efficient. Modern buildings are energy hogs. Old buildings took advantage of natural light. They had bigger windows. They had their windows lined up with the natural breeze that would come through. They had thicker walls, often made of brick for insulation, etc. The fourth reason for restoration is what I call the people factor. Hey, tourism. Everybody wants tourists. Tourists bring money. All tourists want to go find some neat old historic section of town and shop there. Plus, there's psychological benefits to both living and working in a historic area or in a historic building. It's more human scale. Modern buildings tend to be way too big. Old buildings, though, they're small enough, they're built for humans, it makes for attractive surroundings, and the neighborhood is usually walkable. The distances are human scale and walkable. All of this improves mental health, as proven in many surveys, according to Brochi, December 2015. So, in conclusion, we looked at what types of preservation are possible. There's 4 types. We have landscapes, we have neighborhoods, we have building features, and then we have the buildings themselves. And then we looked at 4 reasons why you should be interested in restoration, such as the city factor, it's good for the city, the money factor, the environmental factor, and the people factor. Now, the rest of my team is going to be going into more detail on this important subject. So stay tuned, and I hope you become as excited about historic preservation as we are.